One thing's for sure, it certainly wasn't political consensus. I'd appreciate if the Minister could provide an update on his intentions for this group, now that the bill has finally been introduced. Mr. Speaker, I have raised a number of specific issues within the bill and the regulations that may flow from it. There is no doubt that this proposed legislation places upon us a heavy responsibility, as these changes will impact upon a great many of our citizens. It is therefore of the utmost importance that each of us is aware and takes into account the things that may and will flow from our actions here today. At that point, I would like to raise the level of public awareness about what is coming down the line. Yes, if you ask many people in the street if they knew of imminent welfare reform, I'm sure many of them would. However, if you went on to ask them to explain it, they'd be stumped. It's not their fault. Rather, it's a failure of the department to adequately inform the public of what is coming. We all know of the digital television switchover. We've known about it for years. But for the last number of months, we can't go anywhere, even the Great Hall, without being confronted by digital, hearing messages coming down the gate. They're everywhere. They're on the radio, they're on billboards, and they're even on the televisions themselves. But yet the most radical shake-up to social welfare in the last 50 or 60 years. And there are huge gaps in the public awareness. Of course, the rationale behind the TV switchover campaign was to avoid a surge of people turning on their television to blank screens. But surely people getting letters saying that their benefit is gone or has been scrapped will have an even more daunting effect. Therefore, all I'll say is that the department needs to consider getting its act together on this and start communicating the message clearly to the public that there are big changes coming and that the support that people may be receiving now could be very much reduced and significantly difficult in years to come. It may surprise people outside this chamber who are listening to this debate that we are speaking in such a methodical tone. But that, unfortunately, is the manner of this bill. It was clearly drafted with little compassion or understanding. And it was all the more disappointing that Northern Ireland had an opportunity to make our points, but that we have so far been unsuccessful. I fear the ship may have already sailed on many of these issues. And given the failure of Northern Ireland to adequately get safeguards built into the bill both here and in London, we all face an uphill battle. The burden which is about to descend us here and in the DSD committee is unique, as we alone of the 3 devolved assemblies and parliaments that serve the United Kingdom accepted the devolution of these responsibilities. We will consider and discuss and eventually arrive at the dreaded moment when politics becomes real. And we are required to make judgments and take a decision in the sure and certain knowledge that we will bring misery to so many of our people. And I wonder, as I approach, you'll be glad to hear the end, I wonder, to misquote Winston Churchill, what is the good of all of this? The only guide to a man, or indeed a political party, is their actions. The only shield to their memory is their conscience and the rectitude of their actions. Without this shield, it is very unwise to go down any path, as we are so often let down by the failure of our calculations and the unforeseen outcomes of our actions. With this shield, however, we will walk always in the legions of the righteous. This bill, in its current form, will in effect remove money from Northern Ireland economy which is not currently included in the block grant. The overwhelming majority who benefit within the current legislation from these payments do not have any real disposable income after the essentials of shelter, food, heat, light, power and clothing have been apportioned. The Minister has made reference to moving to work. He is negating the fact that Northern Ireland has a low-wage economy, and unfortunately too many people find themselves in the position of needing to almost subsidise their wages from benefits. Therefore, whilst this bill and the subsequent regulations may have a cost saving, unfortunately I do fear, and I genuinely fear, that they will inevitably force already struggling families to rein in their spending that little bit extra, so that local businesses will then feel an immediate knock-on effect. I hope today's debate will have been some benefit to the Minister. I even hope that some of what I have said will be of some benefit to the Minister. Even if it was the case that the members of the committee were reiterating what many of us have held long-term concerns, unfortunately the Minister has yet to indicate that he has listened. The truth behind all the numbers, behind all the rhetoric, the truth is that this legislation will impact upon people. It will impact upon people regardless of their age, race, religion, colour, creed or gender. Many of them, to our shame, among the most vulnerable and helpless. I think of a former UDR soldier currently awaiting an ESA appeal who suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, having witnessed his comrade being blown in half in front of him. A few years later, he came home to find his partner in the act of taking her own life. He held her limp body, calling for help, but no help came. He broke down at the last appeal hearing, and on the advice of the doctor, it had to be abandoned. I think of a young woman with whom I attended court this morning, and a last-ditch attempt to prevent her from acquiring a criminal record. Expelled from school in her early teens, currently at Tech learning basic literacy and numeracy skills. A daily medication list that would baffle most pharmacists. Attempting to treat conditions ADD, ADHD, bipolar, schizophrenia, threatened schizophrenia, self-harm, mild spectrum autism and personality disorder. That's a lot to carry in a 20-year-old head. I think of a young woman who recently met with myself and my party leader. Her legs were scarred with razor cuts like railroad tracks from her knees to her waist, where she had desperately tried to eradicate the memory of years of sexual abuse at the hands of her brother. Her ESA appeal, and it should never have got to the appeal stage, had to be abandoned, and the process was tantamount to cruelty and torture. And I know, because I was there. These are among the people who will find the amounts of money which allow them to subsist at the lowest levels of society cut to the point where subsistence is impossible. There are difficult decisions coming down the line, and the committee, under the guidance of Mr Maskey, faces many long days' work. Admittedly, due to the short time scale, we will not be able to dedicate, in my view, the appropriate time that they each deserve. This bill will affect every constituency, every demographic within it. There is therefore no political party that should ever believe that it should be awarded anything but the maximum scrutiny. When we consider this legislation, as we must, word by word, line by line, paragraph by paragraph and clause by clause, we must ask ourselves several questions. What happens if we support this? What happens if we don't? Who will benefit and enjoy advantage? Who will not benefit and endure disadvantage? What will it cost? And finally, and perhaps for me most importantly, can another way be found? Of course, I should also say at this stage that whilst we are having this debate with plenty of words but little in the way of detail, they will be followed up by the regulations, which we have yet to see. But that, I fear, will be the most painful part, and the part where there is least room for amendments. This is all the more frustrating, given the fear that many of the regulations may, by necessity, or designed to be brought in through the confirmatory resolution. How is this Assembly meant to demonstrate total scrutiny of these proposals if we only have a chance to vote for them 6 months after they are introduced? I would ask to use this debate to ask the Minister to detail by what procedures he envisages each of these regulations coming through. Be a cheer now. Drawing my remarks to a close, I would like to reiterate the Ulster Unionist Party belief that there are too many benefits, with too many differing criteria. To do nothing is not an option, and inaction will only go on to make things worse in future years as welfare expenditure starts to cripple our public spending. When something is starting to fail, you fix it. However unpalatable these proposals may be, we are faced with the reality of a coalition government seemingly unprepared to listen, and the Social Development Department has yet to make its voice heard. Nothing that I have said here today should be taken as support for this bill. However, the reasoned amendment takes us all into uncharted and dangerous waters. On balance, we will allow the passage of this bill to its second reading to the committee, to allow the committee to do its work. I must warn the two main parties that this is not a blank cheque, and we reserve the right during the future to follow our conscience and, if necessary, withdraw support from this flawed, compassionless, soulless, mathematical calculation that does not put people first. It is now the responsibility of everyone in this House to ensure that what we do now, we do right. And I will leave you with one final quote from a film called Forrest Gump. That's all I've got to say about that. Yeah.